And let's go ahead and get started. I've got a sort of an outline for what we're going to cover today, or I'd like to at least address today in regards to ROI and how to measure it. We're first going to talk about where's the money being spent, how is ROI defined. We're going to talk about two different models, probably the most popular two models that I'm aware of in return on investment modeling and measurement. That is the Kirkpatrick method and the Phillips method of ROI. And then we're going to open it up to some conclusions that I've summarized based on the presentation, and some discussion points about measuring ROI for maybe your specific organization. Before we jump right in to the presentation, I do want to set some expectations here and sort of frame up what the presentation is going to do and how I put it together so that you have a good idea of what it is that I'm trying to impart. I'm certainly open for questions. You can type in your questions to Susan. We will answer them at the end of the webinar. I'll try to answer as many as I can. If I can't, you'll get a chance to get a copy of my email address. And if you want to ask some further questions, you're certainly welcome to. The presentation was I primarily designed it around training, as the previous slide noted, how to measure ROI on training. But return on investment doesn't apply just for training. It applies to many aspects of any organization. Obviously, what executives want to know, and certainly even project managers in the modern age, is what type of return are we going to get on these investments. So what I want to do is frame up for you. I'm primarily going to be talking about training and measuring ROI on training, but I'm also going to slip into some other areas throughout the presentation so that people on the call have an opportunity to see the value of measurement of ROI in other aspects of projects and what have you. So that's sort of a foundation for what we're going to cover today. I kept the agenda short. Like I said, I wish I had 5 days with you. And I'd be glad to go into some deep detail. I'm going to have an opportunity for you to get a little bonus at the end of the presentation. I have a PDF available, and I'll talk about that later in the presentation for you. A little bonus PDF. If you're interested, you can email me. And then before I jump in, I see we've got quite a few people on the call. I'm actually quite pleased to see so many folks on the call. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are calling in from. I was curious, and unfortunately you can't answer, but I'm certain that some of the people on the call today are in the northeastern part of the United States, and I'm just guessing that since you've been kind of trapped in snow for the past, I don't know how many weeks, you've probably looked at every YouTube video on the internet at this point, and this is the only new thing out there. But I appreciate you coming anyway, just because there's nothing left for you to see. But my goodness, the northeastern United States is getting clobbered with a lot of snow this year. So my heart out to all of you. All right, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? So where is all the money being spent? And again, remember my foundational note here and setup where I'm going to talk a little bit about training. So the first thing we have to understand when we talk about training is we need to understand where and how much money is being spent on training. And sometimes we never really put a lot of thought into this. Sometimes we think about training in our own organization and say, oh yeah, we've got a big training budget this year. But if you look at training from a global perspective, okay, here's some estimates for you of where money is being spent. The amount invested in training by organizations is around, if you total it all up, it's around $287 billion, that's billion, in 2011. It's expected, and in fact, it went higher in 2012. It reached about $292 billion and beyond. So that's a sizable investment in learning. In order for this type of investment to be of value to organizations, it only makes sense that they have to see and have to be able to realize some type of return on this type of investment. Otherwise, they're not going to continue to spend money on that. Some of it is necessity, some of it is regulatory, that being given and understood in specific industries, but still, there's a lot of money being spent on training, and certainly stakeholders and executives and management wants to understand, what am I getting for that investment? And the more that you can show, and the more that we can show the value of that investment, the more they're going to invest in training and so on. It's so, it's also important to note that studies have shown that it's a much higher amount of investment when taking into account informal training. This is only money spent on formal training, if you were, and I'll just give an example. We're talking about project management. I'm in the project management business, so I'll use our business. When you talk about formal project management training, when you talk about fundamental training or practical project management training or exam preparation or whatever it might be, PMO training or risk management training, whatever it may be, and that's when we're talking about formal training. The money and the investment goes higher when you talk about informal training, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So what I'd like to share with you, now that we have an idea of where the money is being spent, is how ROI is defined. How do we define return on investment, okay? You might think that data on return on investment for training is hard to find at best, and you would be correct, because there's just not a lot out there. A good, solid, either tangible or intangible data on return on investment in training. So if you were to ask, where can I find this mountain of data on ROI on training, unfortunately, it hasn't been compiled yet. There certainly is data, and there certainly is information that you can gather, and there is reliable information, but there needs to be more. So many times what you'll find is that if you ask how accurate that information is, and that's one of those answers that, unfortunately, it depends. And it depends on when and what was it collected on. So those are some specific areas that you have to ask yourself when you look at the data. When was it collected and what was it collected on? What was the criteria? Was it measurable? Was there any control sequences? So on and so forth. How did it get measured? It falls on the organization to define what is a return on investment when they talk about ROI. So we have to understand that each of our organizations defines value differently. So purpose, or restate that, depending on what you do or what your company does or your organization does, you will find that return on investment is different for each organization that you work for. So, for example, if you're in the medical device manufacturing business, and I'll just give an example here, training be a good investment if the participants only were trained in manufacturing, or the manufacturing process, if you will, when in fact the organization really needs specific information on training on the medical device itself, how it affects the patients, what is it used for, and other specific information about the product that your company is working on. So the example, what I'm trying to say there is, should we just train people on how to put things together, or is it more important for them to understand when the product is finished, what is the product being used for, so that as they put it together, they can have that in mind, so that